I only have one novel with boxing in it, which is a novel about my first cousin once removed, or my mum's cousin, Ray the Cat Jones, who was a real person and who appears in, criminal ghosted autobiographies and so-called biographies of London in the 50s and 60s. So if you read Bruce Reynolds' The Great Train Robbers, I can't remember if it's an autobiography or biography, but they're all ghosted. He talks about Ray being good at spotting young talent and training up thieves, and if you read Mad Frankie Fraser, he has a very peculiar story about Ray escaping from Pentonville prison, which entails him getting severely injured and crawling over the mainline tracks to King's Cross Station and still getting away. And this appeared in a book called The E-List, which Paul Buck put together, who's a friend of mine. And he said to me, I didn't realise Ray was your relative, but I didn't believe his story. I said, well, I don't either, the way Mad Frankie Fraser tells it. So why didn't you research it? And he said, well, how do you do that? And I said, well, I go to the British Library, and in the old days you'd have to guess a date and go back and forth through the pages until you found the story you were looking for, but now they have electronic searchable databases, so it'll take about 2 minutes putting his name in. So I did that, and of course the story of his escape was not that he was severely injured, but there was, when they were mending the roof at Pentonville, a ladder was left unsecured, which he moved with 5 other guys, and he ran up the wall, jumped over, got away. Next guy ran up the wall, jumped over, got away. Third guy broke his ankle when he jumped the wall, and the last 2 got pulled off the ladders by the guards. Which is rather different from the heroic story of near death that you'd hear from Mad Frankie Fraser. But this is one of the problems with criminals, that when you start looking into their lives and their stories, the stories don't actually often match up with the information you can find elsewhere. And while you could say that possibly the newspaper account wasn't true either, it predates the Mad Frankie Fraser story by several decades, 1958, and I think late 80s, probably when Fraser's book first telling this story came out, and it just seems more credible in every way. One of the interesting things about my relative was that if you look at, he came from South Wales, came to London, same as my mum did. But he had left-wing opinions, which is unusual for that kind of crime scene, because they tend to be very right-wing, but he also claimed that he was unjustly imprisoned for assaulting a police officer. Up to that point, he went on the run for 3 years and was jailed in 41. He was kind of the most promising middleweight in kind of Britain, and could have become middleweight champion of the world. Now, when I tried to research his boxing career, I could find absolutely nothing whatsoever. But of course, the fact that I couldn't find anything doesn't disprove that he had a boxing career, it just makes it very unlikely. And because I know with my family, for example, my mother falsified her date of birth consistently, my grandfather has a different place and date of birth on his birth certificate and death certificate. Obviously he wasn't responsible for his death certificate, but my uncle, who went and reported the details, believed what my grandfather said was his place and date of birth. So there's a whole history of this in my family, so I wasn't going to spend forever researching this stuff. So what I did in the book was took what I thought to be, took out everything I could disprove as untrue and left in all the stories I could collect about him that I saw as true, including a lot of stories about boxing, and just when he's on the run and stuff, he's listening to famous boxing matches and stuff. However, when I thought about what do I want to do when I come here, do I want to read that, which is a book which was published in 2014, which is quite a long time ago, or do I want to talk about something else? I thought, well, I probably don't want to read from the book, I can just talk about it. And I want to talk about a different boxer, a heavyweight boxer, because obviously people are more interested in heavyweights than middleweight fighters anyway, on the whole. I certainly know when I was a kid, everyone was obsessed with Muhammad Ali and Henry Cooper, given that I was born in London. Possibly not if you were born in Chicago or somewhere. Anyway, I wanted to talk about a boxer. And I've got a shoulder injury as well today, so I hope this is okay. I wanted to talk about the first boxer to incorporate yoga into his training regime that I know about, who's a guy called Lou Nova,
So in 1939, he was an American heavyweight. He was training to fight a guy called Max Baer, and he went to the Clarkston Country Club where he was trained in yoga by Pierre Bernard. And obviously, the fact that he was training in yoga and at the Clarkston Country Club where they had elephants and all sorts of weird animals was good for publicity for the fight. Supposedly, that fight with Max Baer, which he won, was the first televised boxing match. I'm not 100% sure if that's true, but I've certainly read that. And then he went on to have a few more fights, getting badly beaten up in one and finally having a crack at the heavyweight championship of the world, fighting against Joe Louis and losing against Joe Louis. But obviously the fact that he claimed to stand on his head and meditate in the changing room before he fought created a lot of interest. In this, he went on to have a kind of showbiz career, as some boxers do, films, Hollywood, stand-up comedian. And in the early 60s, he marketed a thing called the Yogi Nova, after his name, which was a contraption that helped you stand on your head. Basically, you wouldn't need your hands, as I'm now in a tripod position, which is more of a gymnastic headstand than a yoga one, which is often a basket with the hands behind your head. But I prefer this because there isn't a temptation to sink into your neck and therefore maybe damage your spine a little. But anyway, he marketed this device which basically you're putting the pressure on your shoulders and you could lift your hands from the floor as you use it, and you can see footage of this on YouTube when he appears on, I can't remember which American TV show it is, but anyway, a TV show with Groucho Marx. And he also gets to recite some Shakespeare while he's doing this, which is kind of curious. But instead of reciting Shakespeare, I'm just going to read one poem from the book of poems I have on the table over there. My collected poems called Send Cash. There's also a copy of The 9 Lives of Radcliffe Jones if anyone wants to buy one. Anyway, this is a poem called Gravity, and it just goes like this. Gravity's a useful thing, it makes the world go round. It keeps the stars up in the sky and us down on the ground. And I wrote that when I was about 18, which was a long time ago.
You think next will be Declan Ryan?